1933, at the height of the Great Depression, newly elected President Franklin D. Roosevelt launched his 100 Days program aimed at finally putting people back to work. Out of that came the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. And with the enthusiastic support of Governor Gifford Pinchot, Pennsylvania was all in.
Not every state did it, but Pennsylvania was second only to California in the number of camps that we had.
There were CCC camps throughout the state. In total, there were 153 camps in Pennsylvania. Pretty much the entire state was covered by CCC camps at some point.
Within a few months, thousands of enrollees were put to work in Pennsylvania state parks, planting trees, fighting fires, and building dams, trails, and campgrounds.
Before the Conservation Corps came into play, there were very few state parks. It really made the state park system here into what it is today.
It's the first really large-scale conservation effort in the history of the country. In the meantime, we had very high unemployment among young men, generally the age about 18 to 24. In some areas of the country, it ran 40, 50%. So what Roosevelt did was kind of marry these two things together to create the CCC, put these young men with their energy, put them out to work doing conservation projects.
It's very good to be here at these CCC camps. I wish that I could take a couple of months off from the White House and come down here and live with them, because I know I'd get full of health the way they have. The only difference is that they've put on an average of about 12 pounds apiece since they got here, and I'm trying to take off 12 pounds.
One of the statistics is that in the first 3 months of enrollment, the average enrollee gained 18 pounds. And this is after heavy work. The CCC was very work intensive. Most of the work was done with pick and shovel.
A lot of folks were out of work, and it's hard to feel good about yourself if you can't really contribute. And so a lot of men were very frustrated and wanting to do, and this was the opportunity.
The young man had to be unemployed. He had to be unmarried. The idea was he would support his parents and family. So they generally had to be below the poverty line.
You made $1 a day. They were called the $1 a day boys. You were sending $25 a month home to your family. It may not seem like much, but it made a difference.
Mid-1800s, there was a booming logging industry here. There were trees, if you could imagine, 120 feet tall, 5 feet in diameter. They would just darken the sky. Huge groves of pine forests and hemlock. So the lumber industry moved in. The lumbermen pretty much decimated the area, clear-cut all these trees.
Truckloads of young men transported into central Pennsylvania got to work transforming ridges and valleys scarred by clear-cut logging and forest fires.
The CCC carries the nickname Roosevelt's Tree Army because nationwide they planted over 3 billion trees.
When you drive into Parker Dam, you see the rows of red pine and spruce, and those were obviously planted by the CCC. You planted things in straight rows, 3 pick handles apart, you know, that's how it went. And as you drive around the state and other places where you see forests of nice straight trees that large, it's like there was a CCC camp somewhere nearby. A lot of the parks were not parks until the CCC created them. This was an abandoned splash dam from the lumbering eras of the 1870s, 1880s. All the stonework that you see was placed by the CCC boys. The stepping stones down below here on the emergency spillway, it is kind of a fun and unique place. And on the sides of some of those stones, you can find the CCC boys' names chiseled in. There's a few you can see when you go down if you know where to look.
For us here at Poe Valley and Poe Paddy, we can tell the Camp S63 was here in large part because of this dam.
And even when we look at the dam today, we see all of those original rocks that the CCC boys put in hand by hand. They basically laid this whole dam from the stones that they found here in the mountains.
Those young gentlemen learned so many great skills from the elders in their camps, the carpenters, the masons. And they did such a tremendous job. These buildings behind me, you know, they're approaching 100 years old and they are in great shape, straight as can be.
They did this work 90 years ago and people are still using them today. Hopefully, people will continue to use them for generations to come.
If you want to get away, this is the place to come to get some peace and quiet and isolation.
In the middle of the Rothrock State Forest, tucked in an isolated area known as the Stone Creek Kettle, is a tiny 41-acre wilderness park called Penn Roosevelt. Here was the site of Camp S62 and an untold story just below the surface.
I have the 2023 Cultural Resources crew for the Outdoor Corps here, and we're in our second year of field work for Penn Roosevelt State Park. So we're metal detecting every 5 meters, a transect from our tape measure on the x-axis all the way up to 50 meters across the field. And we're trying to see if anything's here.
They're investigating the former grounds, so far the parade ground of the former Civilian Conservation Corps camp, to try and learn a little bit more about the lives of the people that occupied the camp at the time.
Something written on the bottom. We have been finding some CCC-related artifacts, some of the basic lifestyle hygiene items that anybody would have in the 30s. Tom's Extract Company, made in USA. No way. It might be a lipstick container. We found a tiny little ointment tube. It was maybe an inch wide, all like rolled up to the very top without a lid. That was in addition to a toothpaste tube that we found last year with a little nub of toothpaste still in it. And then some other artifacts that we haven't identified their function yet.
Yeah, I think we're standing about where this was taken, possibly over here. And then there would have been a bathhouse set up for
like down in there, yeah.
The project is an effort to shed light on overlooked contributions. For this was a segregated camp, home to Company 361C. The C stood for colored, still an official term.
Initially, when they were pulling men into the camps, Roosevelt did not want to segregate it. But there was enough pushback that the camps ended up segregated.
Segregation was still legal at the time. This is from the Supreme Court decision, Plessy versus Ferguson. As long as they were equal, they could be segregated.
It was still separate drinking fountains and separate camps, and they weren't allowed to work alongside each other. The segregated camps were often placed in more isolated areas because, unfortunately, there was still some element of the public that did not like the existence of those African-American segregated camps nearby in the community.
There's an important story to be told about African-American people who came from the city and urban areas, who came out and put in work to craft natural spaces in a way that gives people an opportunity to get outside 80, 90, 100 years later and beyond.
They built the dam over to our right. We're amidst the trees that they planted, especially the Norway spruces that you can see behind me. They built much of the state forest road system and many of the trails that exist today. The amount of man-hours of work they did, I think it would be hard to measure.
I think there's a lot of reckoning that we have to do with understanding African-American Black people's roles in the construction of this country. And there's an opportunity to educate and remind people that these spaces were created by people who may or may not have been welcome, but they came anyway, they put in effort, and they have a lasting legacy.
Many years, we had CCC reunions here. And a lot of the men who had been in the different CCC camps and their families would come to the reunion here and reminisce and look at pictures and talk about what life was like. They were proud of what they had done. And when you look at the parks today, the stonework, the log cabins, the things that are still here, there's a lot to be proud of.
I feel like everywhere I look, there's a stone walkway, a log pavilion, a stone dam. So yeah, I feel like the fingerprints are everywhere.
We are now 90 years out from the beginning of the program, and we are still benefiting from the work of the CCC.
The effort that went into the park years ago is important to realize that it wasn't, the government that built it. It was men and boys that were in need. Your families, your ancestors.
Nature for all is a DCNR principle that we focus on. And part of the reason why we focus on that is so that everyone understands that they have a piece of nature.
Watch full episodes of Keystone Stories now on the PBS app.